Yeah. Hi guys, good evening. In the previous class, we discussed what is RESTful service and why we need to go for RESTful service. So now, RESTful services are used to develop distributed applications with interoperability. What is the meaning of distributed application? If one application is communicating with the another application, then they are called as distributed application. When we are going for distributed application, we need to check for interoperability also. What is the meaning of interoperability? Interoperability means platform independent and language independent. Irrespective of the platform, irrespective of the language, they should be able to communicate with each other. Okay. Now, why one application should communicate with another application? What is the reason why one application should communicate with another application? To reuse one application logics in the another application, one application will communicate with the another application. Now here, when we are developing a distributed application, the application which is providing the service is called provider. The application which is accessing the service is called as consumer. Fine. Now here, in order to communicate from one application to another application, HTTP will be used as a mediator. HTTP protocol will be available. HTTP protocol will act as a mediator between provider application and consumer application. What is the meaning of a provider? The application which is giving the services to other application, that is called as provider application. What is a consumer? The application which is accessing the services from other application is called as consumer. In the real time, guys, one application will communicate with another application for reusing. And the second scenario, when we are going for microservices architecture development, front end will be developed as one application and backend multiple APIs will be available. Front end application will communicate with backend APIs. Now here, HTTP protocol is going to act as a mediator between client and server. HTTP will act as mediator between client and server. We can say consumer and provider. We can say consumer and provider. So this HTTP protocol will act as a mediator between client and server. And another thing, HTTP is stateless protocol. What is the meaning of stateless protocol? What is the meaning of stateless protocol? Every request will be considered as a new request. Cannot remember previous request details. Cannot remember previous request. Every request will be considered as a fresh request. That's why we are going to call HTTP is a stateless protocol. HTTP will act as a mediator between client and server. Now here, guys, when we are developing any REST API, we need to write the methods with the HTTP protocol methods. So here, HTTP method, get method is available. It is used to get the data from server. When we are writing a method in the REST API, so that REST API method will be mapped to HTTP get method. When we need to map our method as a get method to get the, if the method is responsible to get the data from the server, then we will go for get method. Similarly, we will go for post method to send the data to server. To send data to server, we will go for post method. To get the data from the server, we will go for get method. If you want to update the data in the server, then we will go for put method to update data at server. Already one record is available. I want to update that record. To update that record, we will go for put method. Similarly, if I want to delete a record, then I will go for delete method to delete data at server. Any record, if you want to delete by using REST API, that method will be mapped to HTTP delete method. If any REST API method is responsible to update the data, that method will be mapped to put method. If any method is responsible to insert the data or client want to send some data to the server, so to insert record at server, to insert or create. To insert or create record at a server. For that we will go for post method. To get the data or to get the resource, to get resource or data from server, we will go for get method. To insert or create a record at the server, we will go for post method. To update the data at the server, we will go for put method. To delete the data at the server, we will go for delete method. These are called as HTTP methods. Now here, every REST API method should be mapped to HTTP method. Now here, IBM people developed one application. So I don't know what is the technology they are using, but my application should be able to communicate with the IBM application. For that, IBM application methods will be mapped to HTTP methods. Every REST API method should be mapped to HTTP protocol method based on the method logic. What that method is going to perform. Based on that, that method should be mapped to HTTP protocol method. Remember that point. Every REST API method should be mapped to HTTP protocol method. Every REST API method should be mapped to HTTP method. So based on the requirement, if this method is responsible to give the data to the client, or if this method is responsible to get the data, if that method is responsible to get the data, then we will go for get method. Suppose the method is responsible to insert the record. It will take the data from the client and it want to insert the record. For that we will go for post method. Now, if our method is responsible to update the data, then we will map that method to put method. If that method is responsible to delete the data, then I will go for delete method. Now, similarly, HTTP status codes available. Okay, when client send a request, server will process that request and the server will send a response to the client with some status code. Client will send a request to the server, server will process that request and the server will send some response to the client. So now HTTP status codes are 1XX. It represents it is a informational status code. And for success, there is 2XX. So any success response will be represented by 2XX. It is also called as OK status code. Client has sent a request to the server. Server processed that request and the server sent response successfully to the client. If you get the success response from the server, then it will be represented by 2XX. 2XX nothing but 200 to 299. It can be anything. 200 to 299. All these status codes are representing success. Okay. So 200, 201, 202, 203, 205 up to 299. All these things comes under success status codes. Now, next one, 3XX is available from 300 to 399. It is available. That will represent redirection. That will represent redirection. That means you will send a request to one server. that will redirect your request to another server that will be represented by 3xx status code. Similarly, 400 available up to 499. This 4xx status code will be represented as client error, client mistake. That means your request is incorrect. You are sending a wrong request to the server. When your request is invalid request, okay guys, now then it will represent that with the 4xx status code, that is called client error. Okay, 200 means 2xx means success status code, 3xx means redirection, 4xx means client error will be available. Now similarly, 500 to 599 status code is available, that is comes under 5xx. The 5xx will be called as a server error. The 5xx will be called as a server error. Are you guys clear with my point? Now, HTTP methods are available, HTTP status codes available. When client send a request to server, when client send request to server, then server will process that request. Server will process that request and server will send response to client with the status code. Getting my point? Now, so we are going to develop a REST API. When we are developing a REST API, every REST API method should be mapped to HTTP methods. What are the methods available? Get method, post method, put method, delete method. When to go for put method? Yes. If your REST API method is responsible to update the data, then we will map it to put method. When to go for post method? If our REST API method is responsible to insert the record, then we will go for post method. When to go for delete method? It is used to delete the data at the server. Then what is the meaning of status codes? When a client send the request to the server, server will process that request and the server will send response to the client. When the response comes from the server, that response will contain some status code also. What are the status codes available? 1xx status code, nothing but 100 to 199. 100 to 199 is called as 1xx status code. They will represent information. 200 to 299 will represent success. 300 to 399 redirection. 400 to 499 client error. 500 to 599 server error will be available. Now guys, so now for every request and response, header will be available and body also will be available. Now if I take this as a request, when we are going to send a request, that request will contain some values. First one is request URL will be available. First one is request URL will be available. Then request header will be available. Then request body will be available. So to separate the header and body, one blank line will be available. So like this, whenever a application want to send a request, the request will be prepared like this. Request URL, that means which URL we need to access, what type of request we need to send. Do you want to send a get request, or do you want to send a post request, or put request, or delete request? That will be represented in the request URL. Okay, so in the request URL, for example, I want to make a get request www.ashokit.in/course/101. So this is some URL and I'm sending that URL with a get request. So this is my request URL. Header I'm sending some token. In the header I'm sending some token. Token is equal to some admin@123. Okay guys. Now something like this. So URL will be available, header will be available, and body will be available. The request header will represent some metadata. Request body will represent payload. Okay, guys. So whenever a client is sending a request to the server, it will contain request URL, it will contain request header and request body. So now whatever the data client want to send to the server, that data will be sent either by using URL or by using body. So I can send the data in the URL like this. I can send the data by using payload also. What is the meaning of a payload? What is the meaning of a payload? Business data. Make My Trip application want to send passenger data to the IRCTC. So passenger data will be available in the request body. Okay. Whatever the data that we want to send from one application to another application, we will represent that as a payload. Business data. Make My Trip want to send passenger data to the IRCTC. That passenger data will be represented as a payload. Now, some applications will send payload as a XML. Some applications will send payload as a JSON. It depends upon their requirement. Some projects will use XML as a payload. Some projects will use JSON as a payload. Why they are using only XML or JSON? XML and JSON are interoperable. Any operating system can understand, any programming language also can understand what is XML and what is JSON. That's why applications, I mean to say consumer application and provider application will use XML or JSON. Now my payload is a JSON. Then I will tell that I'm sending payload type as a JSON that will be represented as content type. I'm going to specify content type is equal to JSON. So this is a metadata. This is the metadata. What type of data I'm sending in the body, I will tell to the provider by using header. Content type is equal to JSON. Content type is equal to JSON. That represents that I'm sending payload as a JSON in the request body. Content type as a JSON, nothing but I'm sending payload as a JSON. Who should understand that my payload is a JSON? Provider should understand. Consumer is sending some business data to the provider. Provider should know who is this consumer, what data sent by the consumer, what is the output that is expecting by the consumer. So consumer will send that request to the provider. When the consumer sending the request to the provider, request URL will be available, request header will be available, request body will be available. What is this request URL will represent? The request URL will represent what type of request you want to send, what type of request you want to send, and what is your URL. Okay, request header. What is the purpose of request header? Request header will represent to send some metadata. What data we are sending in the input, what data we are expecting in the output, that we will tell to the provider by using request header. And we have request body. What is the purpose of request body? Request body will represent payload data, XML data or JSON data that we want to send will be represented by request body. Fine. So like this, consumer application will prepare one HTTP request and will send it to provider. After sending the request, provider will send the response back to the consumer. In the response, they will have response line and they will have response header and they will have response body. How we are having request line, request header, request body. Similarly, here response line will be available, response header will be available, and response body will be available. So this is HTTP response. In the response line, HTTP status code will be available. Status code plus status message will be available. And in the header, the metadata will be available. Metadata will be available. Response body contains payload. Response body contains payload. Now, client will send payload to the provider. Provider will send payload back to the client. So, payload represents our business data. So, this is called HTTP request format, and this is called HTTP response format. Are you guys able to understand this? Now, so what is a HTTP request and what will be there in the HTTP request? HTTP request will send from one application to HTTP. We are using as a protocol between two applications. One application will prepare the request and it will send the request to another application. What information will be sent in the request? Request URL, request header, body will be available. The request URL will represent which URL we want to access and what is the type of the request. And a request header, metadata, request body, payload, what payload you want to send it. Once the request is sent to the provider, provider will process that request, provider will send the response back to consumer. When the provider sending response back to consumer, response line will be available, response header will be available, and response body will be available. What will be there in the response line? Status code will be available and status message will be available. And then response header will be there. What is there in the response header? Metadata. When that request got processed, how much content coming from the server to client, okay? In which format the response is coming, everything will be represented by response header. And the next one, response body. Response body represents payload. Now if you see Make My Trip application and IRCTC application, Make My Trip application will send passenger data as a payload. IRCTC will send ticket data as a payload. Okay, Make My Trip will collect the data from the user. User data, that is nothing but passenger data. Passenger data should go to IRCTC. So here, Make My Trip application will send passenger data to the IRCTC in the request body. Okay, it can be XML or it can be JSON. Then next one, once the request is received, IRCTC will process that request. IRCTC will send response back to Make My Trip. Ticket data in which format? XML format or JSON format. So payload will be sent from one application to another application. Request payload will be available and a response payload will be available. The request payload or response payload, request payload or response payload will be in the XML format or JSON format. Nowadays, XML got outdated. People are going for JSON. So now Make My Trip will take the passenger data, will convert the passenger data to the JSON data. It will send JSON data to the IRCTC. IRCTC will take the JSON data. IRCTC will book the ticket. IRCTC will send the ticket data back to the Make My Trip in the JSON format. So now when I am using JSON as a mediator between two applications, do I need to bother which technology they are using to develop? No, it can be Java or it can be .NET. Java can understand the JSON, .NET also can understand the JSON. So two applications can communicate easily by using HTTP protocol with the help of XML or JSON data. Are you guys clear? Yes, with this we understood what is HTTP request and what is a HTTP response. So can you tell me what is a HTTP request? HTTP request is used to access resources over the internet. If I want to access any resource available in the internet, I need to send a request. Now you see, we are going to browser and we are typing google.com. That means I have sent one request. I sent one request to Google website and I got the response. So this is a GET request. That is a GET request. Now, when I send the request to the server, I'm getting some response. But in the browser, are you able to see response header, response body? We are not able to see that. So if you want to see clearly about this request header, request body, response header, response body, we will download one tool called Postman. What is that tool, guys? Postman. Now, let me download Postman. Download Postman for Windows. Download the Postman. Yes, I'm downloading Postman software. The Postman is used to test our REST APIs, because in the REST API, UI will be available or UI will not be available? Will not be available. Then how to test it? That's where we are going to use one tool called Postman. I have downloaded this Windows 64-bit version. Postman is downloaded. Simply install that. Next and finish. Yeah. Create a free account and sign in. Sign in later. Skip and go to the application. Now this is called our Postman tool. Now by using this Postman tool, we can send the request, guys. By using the Postman, I can send the request to the server. Now you see here, I want to send GET request to the server. Okay. Here I will type the URL www.google.com. I want to make a request to the Google URL. What type of request? GET. If I want to send a post request, post will be available. Put request, patch, delete, like that. There are several request types are available. Now, I want to make a GET request. So when you are making a GET request, what is there? Request headers available. What is there? Request body available. So request line is there. GET request, this is the URL. I want to make a GET request to this URL. If you want to send any headers in the request, you can set the headers like this. Here, key value, you can set as a header. If you want to send some data, you go for body. In the body, what type of data? I want to send some raw data in the JSON format. So if you want to make a request to the REST API, you can use this Postman and you can test the REST API. Now click on send. I send the request. Now what happened? I got the response. When I get the response, response body available, response headers available. Okay. And response status code. What is the status code I have received? 200. What is the meaning of 200? Success. I send the request. I got the response. It is success. I send the request and I got the response. It is success. So like this in future, when we develop the REST API, we are going to use this Postman to test our REST API behavior. Request URL, request type, request URL, request header, request body. Send the request. We got the response. Response status code, response body, response headers also available. Are you guys clear? Fine. So with this, we are able to understand what is a HTTP request. HTTP request contains below parts. HTTP request contain below parts. What are those? First one is request line, which contains request type plus URL, which contains request type plus URL. Then we will have request header. What is the purpose of the header? Which represents metadata. Okay. Then third one, that is request body. that is used to represent our payload data. HTTP request contains below parts: request line, header, and body. So similarly, HTTP response will be available. HTTP response will be available. So what is the purpose of this? HTTP response contains below parts. HTTP response contains below parts. What are those? Response line. What will be there in the response line? Status code plus status message will be available. Then response header will be available and response body will be available. HTTP request structure and HTTP response structure. So when we are going to develop any REST API, first we should be very good with the HTTP protocol. Without HTTP, there is no RESTful service. Without HTTP protocol, we cannot develop our RESTful services. Yes, come on, tell me, what is the purpose of REST API? What is the purpose of REST API? It is used to develop distributed application with interoperability. What is a distributed application? One application will communicate with the another application, that is called distributed application. What is interoperability? Language independent, platform independent. Without considering about the technology they have used to develop, two applications can communicate, then they are called as interoperable application. When you go for REST application, provider application will be available and consumer application also will be available. What is the meaning of provider application? What is the meaning of a provider? Provider will provide the services to other application. Consumer will access the services from the application. Now, how provider and consumer will communicate? Who is the mediator? Who is the mediator between the consumer and provider? HTTP. HTTP will act as mediator between client and server. HTTP is a stateless protocol or stateful protocol? Stateless protocol. What is the meaning of stateless? What is the meaning of stateless? Every request will be considered as a fresh request. Every request will be considered as a fresh request. Okay. Then HTTP methods available. What is the purpose of HTTP methods? Come on guys. What is the purpose of HTTP method? Every REST API method should be mapped to HTTP method. Get, post, put, delete. What is the meaning of get? It is used to get the data from the server. What is the post? It is used to insert or create the record at the server. What is the purpose of put? It is used to update the data at the server. What is the delete? It is used to delete the data at the server. That means we are going to develop the REST API. Every REST API method should be mapped to HTTP protocol method. Depends on the requirement. If your method having a logic to update the record, we will map it to put method. If your method contains the logic to delete the record, it contains delete. If your method contains the logic to insert the record, post. If your method contains the logic to retrieve the data, get. Like this, based on what operation that method is doing, we need to map that method to particular HTTP protocol method. Sir, if I don't map my method to HTTP protocol method, then what will happen? Client cannot access that method. Okay, whatever the method we are creating in the provider application, who will access? Client should access that method. If you don't map your method to HTTP methods, then clients cannot access your method. So mapping our REST API methods to HTTP protocol method is mandatory. That is mandatory. Okay, next one. Status codes available. What is the purpose of status codes? Come on, guys. What is the purpose of status codes? Status codes will represent how that request got processed by the server. Client sent a request to the server. Server processed that request and the server sent a response to the client. Is it a successful response? Is it a failure response? Is it a client mistake or is it a server mistake? That will be represented by status code. Okay. Now, if you get the 200 status code, that means your request processed successfully. If it is 400, that means it is your mistake. As a client, you are not sending correct request to the server. If it is a 500, then that is a server mistake. Client application will send the request with this data. Request line will be available, request header will be available, and request body also will be available. Then after, response line will be available, response header will be available, response body will be available. Are you guys getting my point? So HTTP protocol is the most important area for the REST API developers. If you are going to develop any REST API, first you need to know what is HTTP, what methods are available, when to use which method, what status codes are available, when which status code will come, what is the request header, what is the request body, what is the response header, what is the response body. We should have idea on those concepts. Then only we can start our REST API development. Are you guys clear with this? Fine. Any questions, anyone? As of now? Online students able to follow me? Yeah, fine. So we got the knowledge on HTTP protocol now. By using this HTTP protocol, we need to establish communication from one application to another application. So in order to establish the communication from one application to another application, we need to use either XML data or we need to use JSON data. XML and JSON are used to represent the data. XML and JSON are used to represent the data. Both are free. No need to pay anything. Both are free. XML and JSON. Earlier, I think 5 to 6 years back, people used to work with XML files for exchanging the data. But in the today's market, people are not using XML. People are using JSON. People are using JSON. All right. So let us try to understand first what is JSON and how to work with the JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JSON is used to represent the data in the form of key value. Are you able to follow me? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. JSON is used to represent data in key value format. JSON is used to represent the data in the key value format. JSON is universal format. JSON is universal format to exchange data over internet. So our applications are going to run in the internet. One application should communicate with the another application. For that, JSON will be used to exchange the data. Consumer will send the JSON to the provider. Provider will send JSON back to the consumer. MakeMyTrip will send passenger data to the IRCTC in the JSON format. IRCTC will send ticket data back to MakeMyTrip in the JSON format. So what is the full form of the JSON? JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. What is the purpose of JSON? JSON is used to represent data in the key value format. JSON is universal format to exchange data over internet. Now, syntax. Okay. How to represent our JSON data? JSON will start with a curly brace, will end with a curly brace. It will start with the curly brace and it will end with the curly brace. Here, ID. Okay. Key, ID, 101. Now, similarly, name. Okay. That is also key. Colon, that is a string value, some value. Okay. Now, gender, that is a key. Keys will be available in the double quotes. Now, mail. Next one, phone number. Okay. Phone number, it is a number value, some value will be available like this. So, JSON will represent the data in this format. Open curly brace, closed curly brace. This is one JSON document. JSON document. In this JSON document, data will be available in the form of key and value. Now here if you see, the left side parts are called as keys, right side parts are called as values. ID is a key which is containing value as 101. Name is a key, its value is Ashok. Gender is a key, its value is male. Phone number is a key, its value is this. Now, when you are writing the keys, always keys will be available in the double quotes. Always keys will be available in the double quotes. Values, if value is a string type, then only it will be available in the double quotes. Are you clear? Now, here we can take some sub-documents also. Address is available. Address is available. Okay. Now, address. So, in the address, again, I am having city and state. Okay. City is available, something like a Hyderabad. Now, comma, state is available, like this I can represent. Telangana, something like this. So, now, so in a JSON, JSON is available. In that JSON, sub elements also available. So this is a person JSON. Person is having address also. Address will be represented like this. Person data will be represented like this. Person is having address. Now look at that JSON structure. ID, name, gender, phone number, we have it. ID, name, gender, and phone number. Okay. Address is available, city, state is available. Like this, we are having the JSON. Now, as a Java developer, we should be able to convert JSON data to the Java object to the JSON. Now, when we are developing REST APIs, we need to convert Java object to JSON and JSON data back to Java object. As part of REST API development, we need to convert Java object data to JSON format and JSON data to Java object. Okay. So whatever the Java object is available, I should be able to convert Java object to JSON data back to Java object. But here guys, in the Java, there is no direct support to work with the JSON, right? Now here in the JDK or in the Java, we don't have direct support to convert Java to JSON or JSON to Java. In Java, we don't have direct support to convert. In Java, we don't have direct support to convert Java to JSON and vice versa. So as there is no direct support available in the Java to work with the JSON, we will go for some third-party libraries. Okay, Jackson is one of the third-party library. JSON, one of the third-party library. By using those libraries, I can convert Java object to JSON and JSON to Java object. We have below third-party libraries to deal with JSON data in the Java applications. We have below we have below third-party APIs to work with. We have below third-party APIs to work with JSON data in Java applications. My application is a Java application. In my Java application, I need to deal with the JSON data. Okay, when I take with that, so what are the APIs that are available? First one is Jackson API is available, and the second one is JSON API is available. Okay, so now here we need to add the dependency for the Jackson or JSON. If we add the dependency, then we can convert Java object to JSON and JSON data back to Java object. Third-party APIs are available. So directly there is no support. By using normal Java, you can't convert object to JSON. If you want to work with JSON data, then you need to add either Jackson dependency or JSON dependency. Are you able to follow me? Yes, tell me. What is a JSON? What is a JSON? JSON is used to represent the data in the key value format. JSON is universal format to exchange data over the internet. So this is how JSON data will be represented. This is the syntax of the JSON. Key will be available, value will be available. Keys will be in the double quotes. The value is a string, then only it will be available in the double quotes. As part of REST API development, we need to convert Java object data to JSON and JSON data to the Java object. Okay, Java object to JSON conversion. In the Java, there is no direct support to do that. That means in the Java, in the JDK, inbuilt classes are not available to convert Java object to JSON or JSON to Java object. Okay, so what are the third-party APIs that are available? First one is Jackson API and the second one is JSON API. You can use any one of these API to convert Java object to JSON and JSON to Java object. Are you clear with my point? Now, so we need to go for Jackson API. We need to go for Jackson API. In the Jackson API, we are having a predefined class called object mapper class is available. Okay, in the Jackson API, there is a class called object mapper. Object mapper class provided methods to convert Java to JSON and vice versa. Object mapper is our class? No. Is it a Sun Microsystem class? Who provided the object mapper? That provided by Jackson API. By using object mapper, you can convert your Java object to JSON and JSON back to Java object. Clear? That I will show you in the tomorrow's class, guys. So tomorrow, as I told, morning 11 o'clock, interview is there, drive test exam is there for the full stack people. So morning JRTP class is also there. Once the class is completed, then exam is going to start for you. As I told you, company people will come to conduct the interview. Fine, good. Any other question? I will upload the notes in the portal now. Any other questions, anyone? Tomorrow we will work on Jackson example and XML example. How to convert Java object to JSON, JSON to Java. How to convert Java to XML and XML to Java. Fine. Let me upload the material. Meanwhile, anybody having any questions, you can ask me. Guys, I'm suffering from some throat pain. I'm not able to speak loudly. And for that, I'm using some medicine. Because of that medicine, बहुत नींद आ रहा है मुझे. So that is the reason yesterday I was not able to take the class. Even in the class also, my eyes are getting closed. Full sleepy mode. Yeah. Notes uploaded to the portal. Fine. Good. Thank you guys. With this, I'm stopping for today. We'll meet in the tomorrow session. I hope all of you able to complete sign up functionality in the project. Yeah. So today you prepare for the tomorrow's interview, logical programming, collections, arrays, strings, and multi-threading. Java 8 features will be available. So they will conduct the test on that. Prepare that properly so for the tomorrow's interview. Thank you.